Mike Adams.
Welcome back. We're in Kansas City for the National Association of Farm Broadcasting Convention. Let me give you the poll results. We ask you this week, should Congress extend the Bush-era tax cuts? 60.6% of you responding said yes, Congress should extend those tax cuts. 35.6% of you said only for those making $250,000 or less, and only 3.8% of you said no, Congress should not extend those tax cuts. So again, 60.6% of you saying yes, Congress should extend the tax cuts. We will see. That's part of the national debate going on right now. Thanks for participating. We'll have another poll question at agritalk.com coming up for you on Monday. Well, we're talking with our friends at Syngenta, and throughout the course of this year, we have been talking a lot about the Weeding Out Hunger campaign. And joining us again is Carroll Moseley, Herbicide Brand Manager for Syngenta Crop Protection. Carroll, thanks for joining us. The year's gone by quickly when we think about, we kind of started the year talking about the Weeding Out Hunger campaign, and we've talked about it at different locations around the country throughout the course of the year. It's been quite a year, hasn't it? Been very successful.
It's been a very successful year related to Helix GT, Mike, and the Weeding Out Hunger campaign in general. It was a lot of fun for us. I have a lot of passion around this subject, as you know, and we discussed it several months ago, and it's unbelievable to me now. Here we are, a few months later, and we've already seen the sales associated with Helix GT related to that, and we've disseminated $100,000 to food banks across the country based on the sales of Helix GT herbicide.
That's great, $100,000. And again, you were able to really help a lot of those food banks in different parts of the country that needed help.
That's right. We did it. We allocated it based upon Helix GT sales across the country, and basically it was 24 states and over 70 food banks that we contributed funds to. And it was an exciting time for us. There were a lot of interesting side stories related to donations and events that took place across the country too, and also over 5 tons of food was generated and donated during the whole campaign.
I thought the great part of it, too, was the local connection, how you promoted local giving.
Well, that was the fun part about it for me. As Syngenta, we always talk about the fact that we like to think globally, but act locally. And what we were able to do was we were able to connect people in their own backyards as it relates to providing for the needy to some of the food banks there. I know in a couple of instances where we went out to events and provided donations to some of the food banks, they were able to meet some individuals in agriculture there that they'd never met before. And in some cases where they had crops and that sort of thing left over, they were able to donate that to the food bank.
Well, it was so successful, others picked up on the idea.
That's exactly right, and that's a good thing. We look at that as a good thing for the industry itself. What better group of people to provide inputs like this for food banks and other ideas and concepts than folks that provide agricultural products? I mean, it's been a great thing as far as I'm concerned.
We're talking with Carroll Moseley, Herbicide Brand Manager for Syngenta Crop Protection, about the very successful Helix GT Weeding Out Hunger campaign this year. All right, so what about next year? Is it going to continue?
We're going to do the same thing in 2011, Mike. We're going to take some of the proceeds associated with the sale of Helix GT herbicide, and we're going to disseminate those funds based upon the sales across the country. We're going to do the same thing. We'll have a big kickoff related to the program, the road show, we call it, in February, and then we'll continue it throughout the year. So hopefully we'll get a chance to visit again, and I can tell you some more about what the 2011 campaign.
Are you going to try to expand it, make some changes next year?
We won't make any major changes related to it. It was so successful. What we want to do is make sure that we get to some areas that we didn't concentrate on this year, that we get to in 2011, where we think will be important for us.
We talk about this being a win-win, the use of Helix GT plus being able to help fight hunger.
It's a great herbicide. We call it our Helix GT, our glyphosate with residual product. It's just been a great opportunity for us, and it's applied early post-emergence in corn. And as you mentioned, or we've talked about before, many of your listeners are familiar with that product, but it's very convenient, and the performance is great, and it's also a resistance fighter brand for us. With all the glyphosate non-performance issues out there, it's been very effective in that scenario.
I want to talk about some of the new research that's being done as we take a look at the importance of early season weed control. This is something that we've talked about with your folks at Syngenta quite a bit in the past year, but how important it is to get that crop off to a good start, because what you lose early on, you may not be able to recapture later in the growing season.
We say in many cases, and it's different in each time, but you can have irreversible yield loss associated with allowing weeds to compete in your corn crop. And I've always been a proponent for 30 years for early season weed control in corn and also in soybeans. But most of my products that I manage are in corn, and the emphasis that I put on it has been there. We've started calling it the far red effect, because a lot of it has to do with how light's reflected back to corn. We've talked about nutrients, we've talked about water in the past, and we've talked about space, and all of those things are important, but in some cases, not many of those things are limiting early in the season, yet we know something else is taking place. We've taken weeds, Mike, and put them in the presence of a corn plant and had the corn plant sense the fact that the weed is there, and just have it being a pot next to the corn plant, not, taking the water or anything from it. So there's something going on there that we're not aware of, and we're going to learn a lot more about it in the next 5 to 10 years.
And you've had some research done.
We've had some research done. We've always looked at, the value of pre-emergence residual weed control with products like Lumax and Lexar, applied early pre-plant or pre-emergence in corn. But we're also looking at some effect related to kernel count and to days to silking, that sort of thing that's, related to allowing weeds to compete with the crop. Many times you can go in there post-emergence when weeds are large and you can control them, and you feel pretty good riding the combine, and you think you've done something. And I don't want to take anything away from anybody related to that, but we encourage people to go in earlier, because in some instances you could have gotten 15, 20, 25 bushels more if you had controlled those weeds earlier as opposed to late.
We're talking about the ability for the plant to grow taller stalks, wider leaves, things like that.
That's right. Well, the wider leaf thing is important, and the fact that there's some varieties that in the presence of weeds, they start growing on top of themselves. In other words, the leaves don't reach across the row. It reaches down the row, and that the photosynthetic capability of the plant is extremely diminished then. And in some instances, the plants grow taller, and at first you might think that's not a bad thing, but it ends up being a bad thing because it's taking the food from the plant away from the roots and to putting it in the shoots. And as you know, in your part of the world, and everybody knows, it takes roots to grow a corn crop, not a shoot.
So you could be losing yield without even realizing it just because of some of these early season development. Or lack of development as far as the plants could be.
That's right. And depending on the weed, we don't know all the things related to this. It may vary by weed species. There's some weed species that are much more competitive than others. Water hemp and lamb's quarter and pigweed are very competitive. And some places in your listening area, they get giant ragweed, which I think is one of the most competitive weeds out there in a corn crop if you allow it to compete with the corn.
This is a different approach to research and development than we've heard before, a different tactic altogether.
It is. It's kind of fun and exciting for me. We've always kind of looked at dead weeds, but we haven't paid that much attention to the corn. And I think what people like to do now is step back. Let's see what's happening to the corn plant when you allow the weeds to compete and be in the presence of the corn. What's it taking away from that plant?
You have some corn herbicide products that certainly farmers need to take a look at. I'm thinking about, here we had a year that was challenging this past year. Corn yields were down a little bit from what many had hoped for and even expected in some cases, and certainly compared to a year ago. We know the tightness of the market right now, the stocks and the pressure to have good yields year in, year out, and to continue to grow those yields. So that makes what we're talking about here even more important.
It's incredibly important. People will want to protect their investment on their corn crop, and one of the best ways to do that is start with an early pre-plant or pre-emergence program with like Lumax or Lexar. The beauty of those two herbicides, and they're used vastly across the corn belt on a significant amount of acreage, but the beauty of that is you can go 30 days early pre-plant up to 12-inch tall corn, and that just allows you to have it's very, very convenient in terms of the time you can apply it. We always recommend to apply it as early as you can to make sure that weeds don't have an opportunity to compete with your corn crop.
Very exciting research, very interesting research. Now I want to wrap things up, coming back to Helix GT and the Weeding Out Hunger campaign. Again, how are you going to kick it off next year as you continue the campaign?
Well, we call it our Helix GT Weeding Out Hunger, road show, and we'll kick that off in February, and we'll spend a lot of time at trade shows and visiting with people like yourself and across the country. It's just giving everybody an opportunity to pitch in. Sometimes agriculture gets a bad rap, and some of the press that you'll see out there, and it's just exciting to me. This is a feel-good story, and I think a great story where we can talk about people in agriculture just providing resources back to their own community.
And the need is still very great.
The need is great. You know, I've said before this started, even with the recession that we have in play, even before that, there was a significant need. The statistic that really was appalling to me was the fact that 17 million children go to bed every night in a food insecure environment. And that's the one that bothers me the most. I've got 4 kids, and I just think about that scenario. And I've got, roots back in my family. My mom grew up during the Depression. She lost her dad when she was 9 in 1936. And gosh, there were 9 kids in that family. So I had a single mom in Southern Virginia trying to raise 9 kids. If they hadn't had help, they would have been in a very difficult situation.
So the need is there. The food banks, we know, many of them are really needing assistance and help, and this is a great way to do it. How can people find out more about the Weeding Out Hunger campaign?
They can go to the website, weedingouthunger.com. Again, that's weedingouthunger.com. It's where they can find more information about the Helix GT program and the Weeding Out Hunger program that we're going to, launch into again in 2011.
Again, you'll want to get into more markets, more cities, more communities.
That's right. And just getting the information out there. The main thing for farmers is just letting people know that they'll say, well, what can we do, or, how can we provide in the situation? Well, purchase Helix GT. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what they'll need to do. But in many instances, they may see an event or something that we do associated with their local area where we come in and may even collect some canned goods and non-perishable items to provide to the Feeding America affiliate in that local area.
It's a great campaign, and congratulations on it and the success you've had this year. Good luck next year.
Thank you very much, Mike, and we really look forward to it.
Carroll Moseley, Herbicide Brand Manager for Syngenta Crop Protection. Stay with us. More to come from Kansas City. This is AgriTalk.